Thank you, PJ. It is time for another edition of the Pair and a Spare podcast. I'm Justin Gaard from The Fan, Chip Scoggins from the Star Tribune, Ryan Burns from GopherIllustrated.com. We are brought to you, as always, by our great partners at Jack's Cafe. Breakfast with Santa starts Saturday, December 7th, the 7th, 14th, and 21st. You can learn more about it at jackscafe.com. Seating's between 9 and 11. They've got a holiday happenings section of the website at jackscafe.com. So as I click on the holiday happenings section here, it's breakfast with Santa. It's holiday buffet brunches. It's New Year's Eve. It's New Year's Day, a champagne buffet brunch. It's all good for you at Jack's Cafe. How's everybody doing today, guys? We good? Last regular season game coming up. This is crazy.
It's flown by, hasn't it?
It goes by too quick. We spend all off season and then it's
waiting.
Okay, yeah, now it's 3 days until a game. National Signing Day is next week. The portal opens after that. Coaching carousel. I mean, now it starts to get ramped up almost.
Yeah, good luck to you,
Burnsy. Is it busier for you non-week when the portal and all that opens, or during the game week?
I think December is now is my busiest time of year with National Signing Day moved up to as early as it ever has been. It's December 4th. So as you're listening to this, 8 days away, maybe 7 days away if you're listening to this day before Thanksgiving. But even the portal stuff, portal opens, I think, on the 9th, closes on the 28th. And we're going to see as much roster departures, or as many, I should say, as we've seen in some time with the 105 coming into effect. You've got coaching carousel stuff with, finally, I think we've had our first Power 4 departure with Mac Brown getting fired here this morning, or I think the way they worded it, not expected to return or not going to return. So he'll get his final game and he'll get his final send-off. But, yeah, it really – the month of December is one where, Chip – I'll tell you, I got a portable charger. I'm going to put a little label on it that says Chip. And so every time I plug my phone in, as I'm doing something, I'm going to think of you.
Yeah. Well, that's an early December 4th, the signing day?
It got moved up. So the coaches actually get a little bit of a reprieve to an extent with the coaches do not go on the road at all in December. It is a dead period in and around the signing day, and then it's a quiet period. It's a quiet period. That just means recruits can come to campus, but you can't leave campus to go evaluate them. It's never been like that before. Usually it's like a 17-day rush of the coaches and PJ with a private jet going to see everybody and their families in their homes. That was one of the changes they tried to make for quality of life for these coaches.
I like it.
Yeah. Was that that was a coach's request?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, just finish your season, have signing day, and then because the portal, I mean, that's become a beast in itself. So you don't need to be going to watch guys play high school basketball or whatever they do in those 17 days.
And do bowl practice.
And bowl practice. And the portal where, I was listening to PJ yesterday. I was reading your transcript where it's interesting that he said during the bye week, he's already having interviews with players to try to get a sense of who's staying and who's going.
That's the new reality of college football, especially with the second bye week so late in the year. They're having conversations with guys like Jalen Logan Redding, Devin Eastern, like, hey, we all know you have another year to come back. Do you want to come back? Do you want to hang it up? Do you want to what are your demands? What are they not? And that's where there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes with them trying to figure out roster retention right now. The nice part is Dinkytown athletes and their members have put them in a much better spot than they were a year ago to be able to, I think, adequately compensate or make very, very competitive offers, I will say, to the Coy Pariches and the Darius Taylors of the world. But when you have your Tennessee bagmen, when they're McDonald's bags and their $10 million budgets, it's always trying to keep up with the Joneses, or at least I don't know who the biggest boosters are at Tennessee, Chipper, but keeping up with the Hillbillies and the Appalachia.
The Hillbillies.
And that moonshine money. Government agent Chip Scoggins, he's been working. He's had this facade of not technology. I'm sure Chip is huge in crypto right now. I'm sure he's made billions in crypto, and this whole thing that he doesn't even put his credit card on his phone.
I'm gonna be one of those guys when I die, you're going to find the money under my mattress. That's what it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to know where to look. I'm going to go to Amy and say, hey, what's up here? Chip said I can take his mattress.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Burnsy. So we'll get to the game because that game had so many tentacles and stuff to unpack. But do you think the NIL, you talking about it, I wonder if PJ will be tempted to go get a quarterback in the portal, a veteran, a guy who's. I think you almost have to, right? You don't want your top two on your depth chart to be freshmen.
It's a delicate balance. I'll say that. I know that they've had those conversations this season behind the scenes in terms of what do we do. It wouldn't shock me if they do go get a transfer quarterback, but I would say this: don't expect anything close to Max Brosmer, because the plan in place, especially with the conversations they've had with the freshman Drake Lindsey, is he's going to be handed the keys, and they want him to be the guy going forward. Now, do I feel great about that with him, Dylan Wicke, who's the Virginia Tech transfer they took last year, and then it would probably be Jackson Collick being your number 3? I don't feel great about it. I really don't. But if you go get a Max Brosmer-esque, I don't think, just with the day and age of this is college football now, I get your hesitation with it, but every indication I've heard from Dinkytown is Drake Lindsey is going to be handed the keys.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think. What if he struggles, or you don't want to go down that path, or he gets hurt? You got to. I
think it all depends.
It's got to have a plan B, right?
To me, what you think of Drake Lindsey, it's what you think of Dylan Wicke.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
I don't know that I've seen enough from him to say I feel great about him as your QB2. I'd go get a different guy from the portal probably, but there's now an art to it. And I asked PJ about it yesterday because the 105 is coming, where Minnesota has I think 117 players on their roster right now. Nebraska is at like 130. So everybody has to be underneath 105 or at 105 by, I believe it's August, by the time fall camp starts. So now you have to almost think about this roster construction wise with how many quarterbacks do you want? How many running backs do you want? There's a lot of different things that have to go into it. And that's where you're going to see a lot of walk-ons lose their spots. It's just the reality of what it's going to be. So Max Shikanjansky, while I expect him back for the spring, we'll see what happens. It's just, there's a lot of different things that Fleck even said yesterday, and I agree with him. I think he's being truthful, and we're going through it for the first time now. We have to kind of learn on the fly here how we adjust. But, yeah, quarterback is going to be one of those spots we're going to spend a lot of time on this offseason.
Well, mostly because handing it to a redshirt freshman is kind of a zag on what everybody else is doing now, right? Mm-hmm. Because of the portal, you usually go find a guy that might be a junior or might be a senior, sophomore, maybe at the youngest, that's looking for a starting opportunity. But there's so many experienced quarterbacks out there that are looking for work and looking for their next job. How many transfer quarterbacks we talked about in the old Big Ten West days, right? Wasn't Minnesota last year the only team that didn't have a transfer when it was Athan? And funny, he transferred. He's at Rutgers now. Most Big Ten quarterbacks, they're not really working with homegrown talent, right? Unless I'm forgetting some obvious ones. Like, it's kind of a zag to – now, we know they love Drake Lindsey, and Max Brosmer talked to me about Drake Lindsey last week. Tanner Morgan, same thing. They love him. They're excited about him. I'm sure they sold opportunity to get him here because I think they had to hang on to him. Burnsy, you can correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of people were coming after him late. So I'm sure they want to make good on their promise that this was the opportunity that was presented and this is why you're here. But it's definitely a zag, even though they like him very much.
Well, I think the other way you have to look at it too is, what does a starting quarterback in the portal go for in 2024? It's going to be $250,000, if not more. And when you look at the holes on this roster elsewhere, you're replacing most of your offensive line, replacing both corners. Offensive line is going to be the most expensive thing from the portal, period. Corners, 2 starting corners from the portal, or at least one that has significant value, that's going to be expensive. So I think you also have to start to look at it as, would we rather go get a quarterback, which most important position in football, arguably in sports, I get it. But I also think you got to look at roster construction for next year and say, even receiver, Daniel Jackson and Elijah Spencer are leaving. You got a lot of other holes and you have an X amount of budget. That's where I think it would probably be better spent trying to address some of the other holes, but I get the hesitation 100%.
All right. Anything else we want to talk about before we jump into Penn State? Anything portal related? This will be great. Next week we'll have a big signing day deal. Maybe Burns, maybe we'll kick it a little bit later next week because there isn't the urgency of a game Saturday. Maybe we'll wait till after signing day, then we can talk about portal. Because I'm sure you're going to be scrambling next Tuesday, Burnsy.
Yeah, it'll be a very busy day next Tuesday.
It's
portal opens that Monday. So
one of your favorite things to say to your wife. One of your favorite things to say to your wife at 10:30 at night, I have to go talk to this high school kid. I know that's one of your favorite things to do. So good luck with all of that.
Yeah.
Good luck with all of that. It is Thanksgiving week. We have learned it's that's why the Gophers are going over to Madison on Thanksgiving, because it's a Black Friday game, 11 o'clock CBS. And I know there's a lot of tension probably for a lot of our audience and a lot of our listeners, because you've got family coming together, maybe from all over the country, maybe from, the Cityots are welcoming the country folk, the outstate folk, the Cityots like me. And you're worried because what happens around the holidays is families fight. Families sometimes fight. There's some baggage and there's some disagreements, and you've got some tension and some angst. And I want to put everybody's mind at ease that I think the best thing to do is just rip off the Band-Aid, whether it's talking about the latest presidential election or if it's talking about a throwback pass to your left tackle on 2nd and goal to knock off Penn State, because families are going to have disagreements about that.
Mm-hmm.
And all weekend, I've noticed that there's a Pair and a Spare podcast family disagreement on that play. And so I think the best thing to do right now, as I'm kind of the mediator between my guy, Randy Burns, my little brother, and my Uncle Chip, I don't want this to fester until Thanksgiving. So I want you guys to say your piece. I want you to argue your case. I know how I feel about it, but this is my house. I'm hosting this house, and I want everything to go well. But we gotta move on from this disagreement here before we can talk about the rest of the game.
All right.
Chip, I'll let you go first.
I didn't know we were arguing. I didn't know Burnsy didn't like the call or appreciated like the call. I didn't like it. I thought it was too gimmicky. I thought it was a wasted down when you needed, you needed a touchdown there. I have a game for you guys. I was thinking about this last night, and because this is one of those games where there were a handful of decisions by coaches that were ripe for second guessing. That
yeah,
it's one of those great games where you had a lot to chew on. Right?
It was an awesome game. That's what I want to get out there.
It was a great. It was
such a fun game with all those crazy things. But go ahead.
It was a great college football. I didn't like the throwback. I thought, PJ's, and listen, to the people that have emailed me or tweeted, yes, I know if it works, we're gonna say he's a genius. I won't say he's a genius if it worked. I say he rolled the dice and got lucky and it worked. The difference in that trick play and the one in the first half is you're actually throwing it to a guy who's a receiver or tight end, but a pass catcher. Mm-hmm. You had your best players touch the ball. At the moment of truth, you're asking a 330-pound tackle to do something he's never done. And I don't buy for a second that Penn State's going to leave one half of the field completely open and let a 330-pound tackle just walk in from the 10-yard line. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying that at all. I just thought it was too gimmicky. I would, in that situation, I think it's one of those things that, he's like, we can fool him yet. But if it doesn't work, you're like, gosh, why do we do that? We have Daniel Jackson. We have Darius Taylor. We have Elijah Spencer. We have Jamison Gears. Let's try to get the ball to one of our playmakers versus trying to trick this team. And I didn't think it was one of these David Goliath matchups where like, holy crap, we're so overmatched by Penn State. We got to try to trick them and do everything. They were on equal ground with Penn State that night. You may not say over, but that night I thought they battled them hard. I didn't think they were severely overmatched in that game. I thought it was too gimmicky. I didn't think you needed to do it.
So I think, Chip, to fill you in, I think you writing a column about it makes no sense to me. Like, that's where you and I don't see this eye. I don't even think that's a top 5 most impactful play from that game. I think
it's 2. I think it's 2.
Okay.
Well, no, impactful play. No, well, losing a fumble, throwing a pick, that's more impactful. I'm talking about decision, not play.
It's 2nd and goal at the 9. And to give context around it, it's, Penn State is one of the best red zone defenses in the country. They're allowing a touchdown on 37% of their red zone. I mean, they're really good. You may not think that there was a clear mismatch. Penn State's front seven was kicking in the teeth of Minnesota's offensive line, especially in that second half. I mean, Darius and Marcus Major had 10 carries for 12 yards, and I don't think they were missing too many holes there. It's a tough spot to be. I would say to expect number 11, and to give context on who number 11 is, the guy who actually stayed on that side of the field, number 11 is going to be a top 10 overall pick in the next NFL draft. He's the best speed rusher in college football, and it's 2nd and 9, essentially. 2nd and goal from the 9. To expect him not to rush the passer there when you actually do get man coverage is like saying Jared Allen is not going to rush the passer in a huge spot. He happens to drop. Brosmer throws it away. I think if the argument you want to make, Chip, and I think it's valid, is if you want to blast Harbaugh for those 3 plays, it went to Marcus Major, Ariante Ursary, and Elijah Spencer. It's Darius Taylor and Daniel Jackson didn't get the football in a huge spot in that game. Absolutely. I think that's very valid. I just think that there's so many other things from that game where you are one of the best storytellers that I've ever met. I just think like that specific play, I get that it was cute. I get that, if it works, it looks great. If it doesn't, but I also would say, like, I think Harbaugh's earned a little bit from whether it was the UCLA screen to Lemeke Brockington in a similar spot where it's like nobody's expecting that. The throwback, you have the Gears one in this game. I mean, maybe you think he's been getting lucky, but I think you had to get weird in that spot because 2nd and 9, you do take an end zone shot on 3rd down to Spencer and it doesn't hit, but like, I get it.
Yeah. To me, it's like you had a chance to win that game, and I trust Max Brosmer throwing the ball to Daniel Jackson or Gears or whatever. I just felt like that was you have this quarterback, and their line was playing. When I say they weren't, it was an even, maybe not even, but I didn't feel like they had to be like, oh my God, we're just thankful to be in this game. Let's throw out the kitchen sink and try to escape this. I mean, they battled Penn State like crazy.
Yeah,
I would rather Max Brosmer try to throw a ball to Daniel Jackson on 2nd down than the left tackle.
I mean, hindsight's always going to be 20/20 with it. I just think that.
Well, no, that's the first guess. I mean, you said, would you rather him throw it to Daniel Jackson or?
But again, if the argument is they should have given Darius Taylor or Daniel Jackson the ball or a shot on that 2nd down instead, sure, yeah, absolutely.
That's just think, that's my argument.
Again, you still get points, and it's a 1-point game. You have all 3 timeouts and the 2-minute warning. You're expecting to get the ball back.
Yeah, I mean,
do you want to play for 7 there? Yes, but I tell you, you don't have a Ursary throwback pass if you're playing for 3. You're playing for 7 with that.
I would play for 7. Yeah, I'm going for the touchdown. I'm trying to get the lead, not kick a field goal. But I will say this: I had no problem, 100% support kicking a field goal there. Like that was.
Well, that's well,
here's how I ranked them, and there were 4 decisions that jumped out to me, and I ranked them. I'll go in order that they happened.
Pass the stuffing. I need another beer.
Yeah. Here we go.
Little brother fighting.
Here we go. 3rd and 9.
Packer game on yet?
Yeah, 3rd and 9 run. Settle for a field goal when you're up 7-0.
That whole series, by the way, bothered me.
Wait. Throwback.
That whole series.
So that series, throwback to Ursary, going forward or kicking a field goal after the throwback to cut it to 1, and then the no punt safe formation.
So you put your top.
No. I'm just saying that's they went. I'm just saying that's how they went in order. If I was to rank them, the ones that annoyed
in sequence
me
of
most,
the game, Burnsy.
Okay. In sequence of the game, what annoyed me the most, the no punt safe, I would put 1. The throwback to the 3rd and 9 sequence where you settle for 10-0 instead of trying to get 14. I had no problem with the field goal. I think that's absolutely the right decision because you had 3 timeouts, a 2-minute warning. You did what you were supposed to do. The defense held them. Like, to me, because if you go for it on 4th and 9 and don't get it, you still need another touchdown. This way, you kick a field goal, you get to stop. You kick a field goal, you win. So that one I thought was the correct decision. So I would put the way they defended the fake punt, the throwback, and then the 3rd and 9 run to, I think it was Taylor, right, in the first half.
Yeah, and that's where, like, again, I'm never going to tell you what to write. Like I said, you are one of the best writers in Minnesota. That's where I was surprised you didn't write about Mr. Conservative himself, even in that game for the last 8 years, loves to go with the punt safe look. And then on a 4th and 1, you send out the return team. That one, it just leaves me scratching my head. I cannot believe that PJ, Mr. Conservative, ended up doing that. I would even, as much as it is PJ with that call, I still think the defense isn't getting enough heat for what actually ended up transpiring at the end of the game, where Penn State got the ball back with 5:50 left. Minnesota had all 3 timeouts in the 2-minute warning, and Minnesota never got the ball back.
Right.
Like the play before the punt safe or the fake punt, it's 3rd and 9. They get a pass rush. They get 2 flybys. Your pass rush is undisciplined. It allows Aller to beat you with his legs to make it 4th and 1. Or even Jack Henderson encounters Drew Aller, and if he just makes the tackle and gets through him, it's 4th and 5. Very different situation. I think Penn State ends up punting it. And there's a couple other plays on that drive where Penn State ends up converting 3 different 4th downs, but it's a 2nd and 8 or a 2nd and 9 or a 3rd and 9 where Aller with his legs extends the play to where if your defense and your front 7 can just get him on the ground, like before the second 4th and goal, or 4th down conversion, Justin Wally comes on a corner blitz, doesn't get him, but if he gets him at the 40-yard line, guess what? Drew Aller ends up scrambling to the 25 on that play. That's a 15-yard discrepancy. So I understand the angst about the left tackle play. I just think the defense not being able to do anything is something to where, I mean, that's what I'm looking at. Plus PJ and all the situations in the entire world not going punt safe there is mind-boggling.
Well, it looked like they were completely surprised that they were going to fake the punt, which shouldn't surprise you.
Right.
Because but yeah, the 3rd and 9 was a killer. It was just a killer because that puts that on the table.
Correct.
If you get the quarterback down, you get the ball back, and everything else is, and the funny thing is too, Coy Parrish, you may think Coy Parrish is going to return. He didn't ever return all night unless I'm forgetting one, because Penn State's punter was pretty good with hang time, and there were always a couple of guys down there. So, I mean, you got to kind of remember how the game was going. Like, you're not going to get necessarily a return from Coy, right, which I'm sure is what you're looking for in that situation. My view on the by the way, I loved Chip's Twitter on Saturday. First of all, just a throwback to the left tackle. What in the world? I could just hear you say it. And then a little bit later, I still cannot believe Flex signed off on a throwback pass to his left tackle on 2nd and goal from the 8 with a chance to upset Penn State within grasp. There is just no justifying that call. I'm kind of in the middle of you two, like I usually am. I didn't have a problem with it. Like people calling it indefensible and ridiculous, I think are overreacting, quite frankly. To me, the key is it was 2nd down. It was worth trying something. I'm on Burnsy's side. And I said this throughout the broadcast. I've never seen, it's very rarely, so this is year 14. I've very rarely seen a defensive line be as disruptive as that one was on Friday, where within 2 seconds of Max Brosmer getting the ball, he's got to decide to do something. Yep. There weren't a lot of opportunities to take deep shots. Even in the first half when he was, placing the ball over a couple of Penn State defenders over the middle to Daniel Jackson or Elijah Spencer, everybody's hanging on for dear life. I mean, Jordan Newbin's in there hanging on. They've got tight ends hanging on. They've got a bunch of people in coverage, and Max has got to put these dime throws still under duress, even though everybody's hanging on. I don't think they wanted to take their chances in the in the red zone, where Penn State, as Burnsy wrote all week, is very, very good. I think they felt like they needed to get a little crazy. Was it probably a little too crazy? Yeah, probably. A throwback to the left tackle is typically reserved for the Guaranteed Rate Bowl or the Duke's Mayo Bowl. It's not typically reserved for that. So I understand that. But the fact that it was 2nd down, you had another opportunity, and you end up getting points, and then you should have ended up getting the stop, which is something we just talked about. I didn't think it was the crime of the century like some people thought. Because the other thing is, too, we've been begging for 8 years to be unconventional and not be crazy. And even earlier in that game, they were, I thought, a little bit too conventional by not wanting to take the sack on 3rd and 9, which, again, I understand. But then let's do something different on 1st down, because you actually are moving the ball. You're not going to get it to the 30 very often against Penn State. Take advantage of those opportunities. I loved it after the block punt. They were aggressive. But funniest is PJ always talks about leaving no time, and that's why he does all this stuff at the end of the first half. They score on one play. There's a minute left, and Penn State comes down and scores. He's probably thinking, that's why I do this. But that, again, goes back to the defense. It didn't bother me as much because it wasn't a turnover. It wasn't something cataclysmic. It was a play that didn't work, and now it's third down.
The thing that bothered me was it felt like a wasted down at a time where you couldn't waste it down. And again, the first one you're throwing to a guy who's used to catching the ball and making moves, and you're asking a guy who's never done that in a game to do it against Penn State. At that moment,
we just never even got to see it though, because the Penn State guy blew it up. We have no idea what Ariante Ursary looks like. He never had a chance to catch it really because that guy was there. Do I think he was going to high step into the end zone to do the Heisman pose? I wouldn't bet on it, but the play just got blown up. It got blown up. It's not like he tripped over himself like Mark Crawford or Dragan Kesich.
I just, and you can say it's hindsight, but to me, it's just like, you have a quarterback you trust, and yes, their line is great, and the ball has to come out quick, but I trust Max Brosner and Daniel Jackson to make plays. The way Elijah Spencer can make plays, I trust him now. Darius Taylor, I trust dumping the ball off to him, maybe not handing the ball off to him. It was such a weird game running. Like there were times early on where it's like, man, they're running the ball pretty good, and then they would have 5 straight negative runs. So it was a weird run night. But dump the ball off to him, something creative with him. In that situation, when you got Penn State on the ropes and you got a chance to knock them out, I would rather go with the guys who I trust. I didn't lose sleep over it. I slept fine, but it just kind of bugged me, I'm not saying I've been, tossing and turning since Saturday night, but in that situation, I thought it was too gimmicky. I didn't think that they had to be that gimmicky. You could say they were overmatched up front. I still think, you had a chance there to, get the ball to one of your playmakers.
Anything else, Bernsey? This is where we go. We'll agree to disagree, and I think the parade's on. Yeah, the Thanksgiving Day parade. Let's see what Al Roker's up to.
I think the only other things I'll add just on that game is that you mentioned that final Penn State drive before the end of the first half, just absolutely killer, where they go 75 yards in I think 44 seconds, score a touchdown. Yeah. You have to bend and not break there. I understand that there was an egregious pass interference call, but you can't break the way you did there. You had to at least hold them to 3. You weren't able to do that. But I also just think if you would have told me coming into that game that Minnesota scores 23 offensive points, like Penn State had allowed 16 total points the last 2 games combined. Ohio State only scored 20.
Right.
And you put up 23, and it's not just one thing from that game, because I think in spurts the offense played well, the defense played well, special teams played well.
Yep.
The coaching, I think, was well. It was good at times. But then there's like 10-15% of offense, 10-15% of defense, special teams, PJ, whatever it may be. And it's frustrating, I'm sure, for many people, because I'd say Minnesota played at like an 80% level on Saturday night. Well, guess what? You needed to be 85 to be able to beat the number 4 team in the country. And even James Franklin, I'll say this. We haven't talked about James Franklin deciding after Minnesota scores there that, you know what, my team is on the cusp of the college football playoff. I am going to be the one that makes the decisions, good or bad, to get my team there or take them out of it. And I think not enough is being talked about with James Franklin deciding multiple times we're playing to win and not giving Minnesota a chance at home.
Before you go, Chip, if James Franklin makes the wrong decision, by the way, Feinbaum's talking about him, and he ends up on first take. Like,
correct.
Yeah. I didn't see Mike Greenberg breaking down PJ's call here, right? I mean, this is because it's Penn State, it's James Franklin. Like, there's an extra pressure on James Franklin with these decisions, so credit to him. But go ahead.
You talk about the guts to call that. I mean, it's 4th and 1, but to call that in that situation, if it doesn't work and you lose and you're out of the playoffs, holy cow. You talk about heat on a coach. I mean,
talk about heat on a coach. 3 straight times there was.
I got to be honest with you, and people disagree with me on this. I would have kicked the field goal instead of that last 4th and 1.
Yeah.
Because they're on timeouts, you got to make them drive the length of the field. But he trusted his players, man. And even if they don't get it, they still. But with Dragon's leg, they don't have to go that far to get it.
Right.
In range.
Right.
But yeah, you go back to the Gophers, like Max Brosner just dropping the ball before he can pitch it. I mean, that's
his first interception in 206 pass attempts, which was the longest streak, or
right.
even just his first turnover since September in general, and he just drops the football. And
yeah, well, it's interesting because like we talk about the defense. It's like there was that one series, where I thought their quarterback was just going to absolutely lose his mind. Like he was having he was having an absolute meltdown as he went to, and then they came back and they went tempo, right? And they started getting it. They had 3 straight passes to their tight end Warren, and it's almost like that settled him down. I love the way there are things that you love the way the Gophers played in that game, but then there were these lapses, half a dozen things, whether it's just dropping the ball or running on 3 and 9 or the throwback or it's just like Penn State's good enough. I don't think they're in Ohio State or Oregon's category, but they're good enough that you can't have those kind of mistakes and think that you're going to be able to knock off them. So it was a great college football game. A lot of I love it when you have a game where there's a lot to chew on and you can talk about it for days. Like if they had done this, they had done that. This coach did that.
It's been like this whole season for Minnesota, which I will also say, I think Penn State's defense is good enough to win a college football playoff game. I think their offense is why they're going to get bounced.
I do too. The quarterback's too inconsistent. And
well, you have Tyler Warren, and the backs are good, but your receivers are I don't think they're going to be good enough to win a college football playoff game. But I think also within this fan base, because of how this season has been, they're 3-4 in 1 possession games, and seemingly every game for the last 2 months has been 1 possession, 4th quarter, could go any way, and it's now come up tails instead of heads the last couple of games. I think it's a very emotionally exhausted fan base.
And I want to bring that up. This was on my list. I think it was reflected in the attendance too. And I'll start by saying this is like, I'm never going to criticize people not going because we get into the games free and we sit in the warm press box.
Not all of you, not all of us.
Not all of you. Yeah.
Some of us are freezing our ass off on the field. But although it wasn't that cold, I'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, I was surprised by the empty seats. I think the Rutgers loss took a lot of the wind out of the sails of this fan base. You got the number 4 team coming in. It was cold, but it was 40 degrees. It wasn't like bitterly cold where you're like, this is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And there was probably 10,000 empty seats there. I was surprised by it.
You know what we heard consistently on Friday and Saturday? Grim and I were talking about it. More people were concerned about the cold than you would have thought. Like,
really?
Yeah. And I don't know if it's because we've been living right here and it's been 50s basically for like 2 months. And we've had like 1 little snowfall. And I know we had some snow last week. Because Grimmer was asking people, he has some tickets and his family will use them or he'll give them away or whatever. And he said multiple people are like, it's too cold. And Grim's like, it's 35 degrees and there's no wind. And like, so that was something we heard consistently through the week. Yes. If you're a ranked team and you're, 7-3 as opposed to 6-4, there's probably a different vibe. Because I do think that would have made a difference just in general interest, but the weather for some reason kept people away too. Now, if both teams are in the top 10, nobody cares that it's cold, right? So, but I agree with you because I know they sold a lot of tickets. I mean, which is also surprising. Like usually nowadays when people buy tickets, they go. I know a lot of tickets were sold and they were, I think pretty close to a relative sellout there, but for whatever the reason, some people decided last minute not to check it out.
It was noticeably big. It was. I would say that the attendance to me was noticeable when I looked out and saw the stands. I mean, it was just not
everything but the student section. For whatever reason, the student section was absolutely incredible every single game.
Yeah, if I'm Mark Cole and them, I'm wondering what happened here because maybe it is the Rutgers loss too. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe the Rutgers loss, took the wind out of the fan base's sails. I don't know, but if I'm the administration, I'm like, this is the number 4 team in the country, and we don't come close to selling out a 50,000 seat or having 50,000 people in the stadium.
Anything else we want to talk about quickly before we talk about Jack's Cafe? Anything else on this game that we can come on the other side with, Burnsy, that you want to tease?
I think the only thing I would add is you look at the attendance, certainly. And I think Dan Owen, actually, from my folks here at Gopher Illustrated, looked into the full attendance for the last 15 years. I know it's been 16, but you can't count COVID because nobody was there. This season ended up, attendance-wise, for what they announced, 8th out of 15 years. Now, the discrepancy between 8th and, say, 3rd is about 8,000 tickets, so it's not a very big difference. But it is worth talking that I think that Rutgers game, for whatever the reason, with how it ended, with people not thinking Rutgers is very good, I think it did. I think you did see a lot of it played out after the bye week.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Crowds were good all year, just from my perspective. Like the energy and the environment, there's such a noticeable difference from when I first started doing this, and we've talked about it a million times, but they do have a hold of, on the football side, younger people that are inspired to go to the games, whether it's home or road. And so if they can have another season like they did back in 19 or even in 14 when they went to the Citrus Bowl, which they were kind of on track to do if they had knocked off Rutgers, and we'll see what happens against Wisconsin, that can capture a lot more people. But I think the tailgating is as good as it's ever been, certainly in lot 37 in the Ski-U-Mah lot. Don't bring your kids. I think the tailgating is as good as it's ever been. The travel is as good as it's ever been. And just from my perspective on the sidelines, like the home side is always pretty full. It's that visitor side that you don't really know. I think there's a lot of corporate tickets over there and some partner tickets over there, and just not as many season tickets over there, even though that's the sunny side during, the fall and the winter if you want to stay warm. But the vibe was good, and, the students have been great since COVID. Yeah, I don't know if it's because they missed out on all of it, and some of those seniors, when they came back, were 2019 freshmen and remember what it was and have made it a thing. So, but yeah, they've still got work to do there to make it a consistent thing where we're not talking about it as much. But all told, I think it was a pretty solid year that way. Anything else before we talk about Jax?
We're good.
Productive discussion. I hope that could be a template for families all over. Families across Minnesota, FAM, families across Minnesota and the country, on how to civilly talk about something that you fundamentally disagree with. I think that's a good template. And now we move forward and pass the stuffing. You know who has stuffing? I'm assuming. Jack's Cafe, JAXcafe.com to make your holiday reservations. Don't forget, Breakfast with Santa starts this Saturday. Well, next Saturday after Thanksgiving, December 7th, 14th, and 21st. JacksCafe.com to take a look at the openings there. They've got seating times between 9 and 11. Then they've got some great dinners coming up that you can check out. It's all there at the Jack's Holiday Happenings section on JacksCafe.com. They will have lunch on Christmas Eve. They're open for dinner on New Year's Eve. They've got a champagne buffet brunch on New Year's Day. They've got something for everybody, guys, but this Breakfast with Santa is always a fun tradition.
Yeah, I think if you have kids, sign them up for that. But I was thinking about this the other day. Is like, wouldn't that be a cool place to have like an office holiday party?
Yes,
absolutely.
Like call up Bill, reserve a room upstairs, reserve, an area, because they had so many areas in there. Bill gave us a tour there the first time we went there. It's like they got all these little nooks and crannies and cool places.
They do.
If you have an office party, what a cool place that would be to have it right there. So call if you're thinking about, where should we host an office party or gathering? That's Jack's is the perfect spot, and call Bill. He'll hook you up.
Yeah, Breakfast with Santa, holiday parties. I'll say from my end, maybe you're thinking about going out to a little Christmas dinner, a little anniversary, whatever it may be. We've seen plenty of our listeners do so. The hill I have died on all season, and I've gotten a little bit of guff for it.
Guff.
It's the best steak in town to me. And I don't say that lightly as someone who consumes copious amounts of red meat in my life. I think that steak is absolutely fantastic. And then Chip, Mr. Dessert himself over there.
Creme brulee. Creme brulee, baby. The best in town.
And me, Mr. Nostalgia, as you can see behind me with all of my old artifacts here, I'm just a sucker for the old menus on the wall and the matchbooks for your reservation name. So everything is first class at Jack's Cafe. Breakfast with Santa, December 7th, 14th, and 21st. And by the way, a final thank you. We didn't even really realize this when we signed up with Jack's Cafe a couple of years ago and joined this partnership. the Parent and Spare podcast, we became season ticket holders to Gopher football, apparently, because we get tickets every game, including the Penn State game. And we appreciate Bill every week. Just all of a sudden I'd get a text, would just say Jack's Cafe sending you their tickets, and we could give them to listeners. And so many people made memories this year, which is awesome. It was always fun to see your pictures for those of you that went to the game. Really cool seats in that open end zone, easy to get to, which is great. Especially if you have kids, and then you can jump around back there on the plaza when they're completely bored and just looking for Goldie. But we appreciate Bill taking care of us, and we appreciate all of you taking care of Bill and Jack's Cafe, and hope you have a great holiday season at Jack's. Make your reservations at jackscafe.com. We'll preview Wisconsin here in a couple of minutes, and breaking news, Parent and Spare, we are all boots on the ground in Madison, which is awesome. I'm very excited about that. So we will see everybody there on Friday. Maybe we'll take a Camp Randall picture. It'll be like the 10th Camp Randall picture Chip has taken, because he sent half his family there and, basically has a wing named after him at the Barry Alvarez Field. But some of us don't have as many pictures, so we'll do that. But Indiana, Ohio State, I did not get to see much of this at all, Burnsy. As you know, I'm out on Oak Street where you come and see me for the pregame show. I'm sure it was on the TVs in the press box. And Indiana hung for a little while until they didn't. So what happened in that game before we talk about the bigger ramifications?
Yeah, hot start where Indiana scores, I believe, on their opening drive. They get a stop defensively. They're up 7-0. You're thinking to yourself, can they actually do this? And then Ohio State runs off 30 straight points, and a late touchdown for Cignetti makes it 38-15, which with the way that college football ended up going, and I'm sure we'll get to it, it's not the worst case scenario for me for Indiana. But losing by 23, Chip, isn't exactly going to inspire, I think, the committee.
Well, it's funny, that last scoring drive, it was like methodical. They were not in a hurry, so it was like, let's score, make it look a little more respectable. And then Ohio State comes right back and scores 20 seconds left. Like, no, we're not playing that game. They found out that Ohio State's in a different class. Obviously, when you're playing there, that's a tough place to play. They got a lot of help after that loss with what happened around college football. Ole Miss and different.
Your team, Oklahoma had not won a game against an FBS opponent since September. They're touchdown underdogs at home.
Which is crazy. I know, which is crazy.
And they win 24-3 over Bama to put Bama at 3 losses. Ole Miss loses to now suddenly a red-hot Florida to put Ole Miss at 3 losses. You know who the big winner from last weekend was, Chip? Rocky Top.
Yeah. We benefited for sure. So I'll be curious to see. The rankings came out last night, right? Or
no, they'll come out tonight.
They come out. We're taping this on a Tuesday. They come out Tuesday night.
Yep.
I'm curious to see what the committee thinks about Indiana and how they frame that loss.
I will be upset if you put in, say, a 3-loss Bama.
Yeah.
Over.
I don't think
no
they
chance.
Can't do that. They
no
can't
chance.
Do that. No.
No
they
chance.
won't do that. Not from the Big Ten, even though Indiana's schedule's easy. But I mean, I was just looking at it earlier. Like, look at Notre Dame's schedule.
Right.
I mean, so.
How perplexing does that Northern Illinois loss look now that NIU is about a 500 MAC team?
I know. Well,
I watched them lose to Miami on Thursday night or Wednesday night or whenever it was.
Tuesday night to you, Maction, baby.
Yeah, there you go.
That's right. So as I saw Burns. It was at halftime. I told you, I was like, or maybe afterwards, like, gosh, I just don't know if Penn State's one of the 12 best teams in the country. But you're right. It's like, well, look at everybody else. They probably are.
I think there's a difference between the 12 best teams in the country and who can actually win the college football
and the 4 best, and the 2 or 3, 4 best. Yeah.
Because you think about when the rankings drop tonight, you're going to have Oregon or even Texas. Okay. Texas is probably going to be the number 2 or 3 seed. Texas, I saw the graphic yesterday. UMass has played 2 SEC teams. Texas has played so far every game on their schedule. UMass has played more SEC teams with an above 500 record than Texas has. Texas's best win right now is Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
So what happens this weekend, Chip, if Texas loses to A&M, who also lost?
Yeah.
Because Texas's best win, I mean, and God bless Vanderbilt and for what they've done, and Guardsy's guy Jerry Kill this season. Like, what do you do with Texas? I mean, Chaos. They probably make it. Absolutely. I'm not disagreeing, but them as a top 4 seed with that schedule? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you start looking at who these teams have played, and I don't know if they're looking at eye test or strength of schedule or what, but I think a lot of, of the 12 teams, probably 10 of them have warts. Or you don't really know how good they are, right? Or a bad loss or a confusing loss or I look at Penn State and they got a lot of talent, obviously, but they're not just steamrolling teams off the field.
The only team that looks like they have the least amount of warts is Oregon, and we're still talking about an Oregon team that was trailing, I believe, going into the fourth quarter against Wisconsin before the bye week.
Early on they didn't look great.
Correct.
Early in the season. Now, that's early in the season. You want to see a team get better as a season. I think they've done that. I think Ohio State's really good. I do think they're really good.
I think the top two teams in the Big Ten, and I think there's a mini teardrop, are Ohio State and Oregon, and then it's a mini teardrop to Penn State and Indiana now.
And then I think there's 4 tiers. I mean, I think those top 2, then the next 2.
And then 5 through 17, and then Purdue's 19th place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I'd throw Northwestern in there too.
I was going to say 14, and then I think the bottom 2 are Northwestern.
Yeah, and Maryland has completely gone pear-shaped too.
Yeah.
But, it's I hope – I said it last week. It's a worst-case scenario because Indiana's opened the door for something crazy to happen, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it will. I think if you look at the All-State playoff predictor on ESPN.com, they're still in I just had it up. They're still in like a really good spot. And they've got Purdue this weekend. And the danger was if you got blown out, you don't really have a lot of opportunity to make anything up because no one's going to give you credit for Purdue. So, but they opened the door for something weird to happen because of how non-competitive that was once Ohio State got their teeth into the game. I still think
11-1.
It's not their fault who they played. And they pretty much boat raced everybody except Michigan, right? I mean, it wasn't like they were, grinding it out every single game, trying to hold on against these teams. They were routing teams consistently. I just have a hard time thinking that they're going to get left out of this thing.
That's the way I look at it. It's like if they go 11-1 and they were impressive for all but one game, well, a lot of teams are going to get beat pretty bad in Columbus
at the shoot.
Right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. That shouldn't be. That one game should not override the other 11 and say, well, this is not a playoff team. We're going to put a 3-loss SEC team in there. I don't think that's going to happen. But
especially if Notre Dame's just going to get the 5th seed after losing to Northern Illinois. And I know they've looked better. Yeah. Exactly right. Now, I wouldn't be surprised USC could knock them off this weekend. You know what I mean? Just how weird this stuff is. USC made the quarterback change. Would I bet on it? Probably not, but nothing would surprise me.
8 through 11 is going to be so fascinating to see what they end up doing because you've got now suddenly a red-hot Arizona State team because both BYU and Colorado lost. I don't know if you've seen the tiebreaker scenarios, but I think there's 6 different Big 12 teams that could somehow come away to get in the conference.
I thought about bringing that up, but I got so confused reading it. I said, this is not a nuts and bolts podcast like that.
No,
we need to talk. We're surface level. Bernsey can handle that on Gopher Gridiron Radio. With
you can break that down on the hardcore.
Yeah. Luke Buer can handle that one. Buer can handle that one with Derek.
But there's just so many different nuances to this thing where I'm looking at even Nicole Auerbach's, college football playoff picks heading into tonight, and 8 through 11, you've got Georgia, Tennessee, Indiana, SMU, and she left out Alabama, Clemson, South Carolina, and Iowa State. And it's just, there's so many different ways that this thing can go yet. And while it's going to be who gets in, I still think there's probably only a couple of teams that can end up winning it. But as we've seen this season, no team is clearly like a Georgia or Bama from yesteryear because of the way it's all worked out.
Yeah, no, I don't know that it's wide open, but I also don't think from what we've seen in college football, if, team number 9 got hot and won a couple games, you wouldn't be like, oh God, where did this come from? I just think college football is changed. I mean, it felt like it's just changed overnight. Mm-hmm. That's probably being too dramatic, but
it's the parity we've all been asking for. I even saw the arguments going into that Indiana Ohio State game last week of, well, if Indiana gets blown out, this is why they shouldn't be in the playoff. And it's like, okay, well, Oklahoma was a 2-touchdown home underdog, and they just absolutely obliterated Caleb DeBoer's team by 18 points, and that was a 2-touchdown spread. That's why in 2024 we play the freaking football games and not on paper.
Yeah.
Like even the Gopher game. Yeah. I mean, that was a 2-touchdown spread. It ended up at 12.5 or 13 points.
Right.
And Minnesota ends up losing by 1 and probably had a pretty dang good chance, I think we can all agree, to steal that game. So it's just, I'm so tired of the hypotheticals with this thing. At the end of the day, you have to look at what the records are. And yeah, who they've played matters, but I don't want to be on that committee. I'll tell you that much. 8 through 11, there's going to be a lot of angst about those different decisions.
Well, this is why going to 12 is such a great thing for college football, because we're all 100%. Talking about it across the country, like this team, that team, comparing resumes. When it was just 4, it was so much more cut and dry. Now we might complain about 5 or 6, but now you have so many other teams who are like, you know, and you throw into what the portal's done for evening out the sport. I mean, I look at the Big Ten, and, you know, I was thinking about this. I'm going to be writing about this for my, you know, my column this week. Is like, and we've talked about last couple of weeks, is like trying to make sense of how you're going to make that jump or have that. And I think so much of it now is going to be, man, you've got to maximize 50-50 games.
Yeah.
And maybe Penn State wasn't 50-50, obviously, because they were a big, you know, favorite coming in here. But on those special years, you got to find a way to win that game.
Yep.
You know, and that's how you pop up and win 9 or 10 games. And it's just going to be whichever team gets a good schedule and just figures out a way to win those games, those 50-50 or close games. PJ, you know, it's been a talking point. 3 and 4 and one score games. Now, I could argue UCLA could have just as easily gone the other way.
So could USC.
Yep.
As USC, as we're talking about these. But it's like the seasons where you've had the 2019 kind of magical seasons are going to be those seasons that you find a way to win a pretty big percentage of those.
And I think it's the same formula as it's always been when you had the West, right? It was about the 50-50 games against your rivals and then your crossovers. That was the schedule. Now it just feels like there's way more 50-50 games. It just feels
there's
like
9 of them. There's 9 of them.
Where there used to be like 5-ish, maybe. Yeah. Maybe I'll go back. Maybe that's an off-season project for Daniel House. Now he likes diving into the data, but it felt like there were a handful, and now it feels like, I mean, the last 2 months have essentially been that, right? Even going back to, you know, the Michigan game, you know, that ended up being a coin flip, which you wouldn't have anticipated at the beginning, and you melted down in the first half and gave yourself no margin for error, and then you end up losing that game. But basically, from that point on, it's been 4 games into the fourth quarter or games into the second half. I mean, you mentioned it, Burns. He had the emotional toll of which has made it fun. Like, it feels like such a more fun season just to have watched and covered, and they're 6-5. You know what I mean? There's just been like so many things that have happened. It feels like when I think of 6-5, I think of like boring. You're muddling through it. It's like, no, they've had an unbelievable couple moments. They've had some unbelievably tough losses. The swings have been crazy. I just feel like, you're right, Chipper. You got to have the right schedule. You got to have the right teams at home, probably. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to those top teams, the little 4 or 5 team tier. And then you have to somehow find a way to win the majority of those coin flip games. And so it just feels like every week. I mean, I haven't pulled up the standings, but I looked at it yesterday. How many teams are 6-5 or 5-6?
13.
Probably
everybody
8 or 9, 8, 9 or 10.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. And so we'll see, because Dan Barrera was talking to me about it yesterday. He says, because PJ says we're a good team, we just have to do it. And Dan's point was, well, you haven't done it enough. I said, to have the special year, you haven't. But there's also 10 teams that are saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Like,
that's
the craziest part is, like, think how Rutgers feels right now. I mean, how Rutgers made a mess of that Illinois game. Like, Illinois has manufactured a good 8-3 record. They're still pissed about the Minnesota game, because that, to them, that should have been a winnable one. That where the Gophers played well the whole game. And, you know, I know there was some doubt at times, but the Gophers pretty much handled them, and they could be in the playoff conversation if not for that game. Would I pick them? Probably not, but they'd be in the conversation at least if they finish strong with 2 losses. And so there's 10 teams that are kicking themselves about 2 or 3 games, but also probably have to have the self-awareness that we stole a couple too. And you just you have to find a way every couple of years to keep people interested in what you're doing, to break through and get to that 9 or 10 win threshold.
And that's where Indiana is the beneficiary of a very soft schedule. And kudos to Kirk Cignetti, got his transfer laden team ready. But then you have the other flip side of the coin, which to your point is Rutgers, where Rutgers had a Charmin soft schedule.
Yeah.
And now they're sitting there at 6-5. And I'm glad you brought up the other teams where there is a slog in this second, third, fourth, whatever you want to call it, tier. I know every Gopher fan listening is exhausted from this. They're kicking themselves. But like, you look at the rest of the Big Ten. You don't think Washington or Michigan or Nebraska, Rutgers, whoever it may be, where you're all 5-6, 6-5, and you're like, well, what could have been? I just think that so much of this doesn't have to be, if we're not competing for the college football playoff, it's a failure. And I feel like we're getting more takes that are like, if you're not, it's like Ricky Bobby, if you're not first, you're last.
Yeah.
It's like you can, again, preseason expectations versus reality versus how the 11 games have played out. I get it. But there's just so much to it where you're not just the only fan base. There's 8 other fan bases in the Big Ten, all around 7-5 to 5-7, where they're like, well, it is what it is.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's perspective, right? You don't think about other fans, but you think about your team, and you think about what you don't care about what Maryland or Rutgers, But I like this last game.
Good transition.
I just think in terms of perception,
huge.
If they win this game, you're not going to say this is a great, wonderful season. But to me, the difference between 7-5 and 6-6 is enormous.
I agree with you
in perception. Because if they lose this game and you go 6-6 when you only play one of the top 4 teams in the Big Ten, and you will have been 1-7 in the last 2 Novembers, that perception-wise, that's hard to swallow. Even in the Big Ten and craziness, and everybody's similar, footing, a lot of, except for the top teams. I just think if they don't win this game, it's going to be a sour taste on this season.
Yeah, I agree. To me, last season has nothing to do with it. I wouldn't put the 2 Novembers in. I would just say, because it's totally different teams, 6-2 to 6-6 with 2 coin flips in there, Rutgers and obviously Wisconsin, which I think is still like a 2-point spread. I agree. That would be a disappointing way to end it, but it's because you had built it up to a good spot where you beat a team that's ranked right now, Illinois. You beat a team that was ranked at the time, USC. Like, you had all that positivity, and to have it go like that, even though it wasn't like last November where the wheels just completely came off. Yeah. But to lose those games and then to lose to your rival, who's reeling, by the way, even though
who's not very good right now.
They hung with Oregon a couple of weeks ago. It was an awesome game. And then kind of got run out of Lincoln. It looked like, I didn't see a ton of that one, but it didn't look like they were super competitive. 7-5 looks different than 6-6 in this Big Ten too.
Yeah.
With how it's going. Like, there's going to be a big group at 6-6 probably. I don't think the same can be said about 7-5.
Well, and I look at this too, and maybe I'm wrong. You have your best passing quarterback since Adam Weber.
Mm-hmm.
I think this team has some pretty high-end talent when you talk about guys that are going to go play in the NFL. You have a left tackle that's going to be a first-round pick or a high pick. I think Lindenberg's going to be an NFL player. Wally's going to be an NFL player. John Joyner's going to be an NFL player. You got one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. You got one of the best wide receivers, in the Big Ten. This team has talent, right? You know, and so
they just haven't been able to put it together consistently.
If you tell me they finished 6-6 with this talent, I'm sorry that it's going to be a disappointment.
Yeah, I think it would be a buzzkill to lose your last 4. There's no arguing that. But in handling Wisconsin, there's always you get extra credit for that one a little bit. Like, that can just kind of save. Yeah.
And it matters. It matters.
Yeah.
It's a rivalry game. It's even with Wisconsin losing 4 straight, they are now I see a 3-point favorite on DraftKings.
Interesting.
Which Wisconsin has played much better at home than they have on the road, especially here in the last 6 weeks.
Their defense is pretty salty still, it looks like.
I mean, they took Oregon down to the wire at home. They took Penn State. They were leading at halftime against Penn State, and then they've kind of faltered. It's Braden Locke, and for me, it's 2 things. It's Braden Locke, who Minnesota this season is 6-0 when they have forced multiple takeaways.
Yeah.
They have 17 takeaways in their wins, and their 5 losses, they have 3. They need multiple takeaways against Braden Locke. And then I've said it all year, and I'm going to die on the hill again. The offensive line it's going to be 20 degrees. It's going to be a little windy. Like this, you have to come to play.
Already.
Like you have to come to play. Like I don't understand how you have your best left tackle of probably my lifetime in a Gopher uniform. Yeah. You have Quinn Carroll, who I think has a shot to make a 53-man roster. Tyler Cooper just accepted an invite to the Shrine Bowl. You have talent, yet they have not put it together. Like, I don't understand how this continues to happen. You guys know it. I know it. Our listeners know it. In a late November game, it's going to be won and lost like every single Axe game is in the trenches.
Yeah.
We've seen it flip sides of the coin both ways. There's no Braylon Allen over there. Minnesota can't run ball consistently. Like, they need to play this offensive line, their best game, if they're going to go into Madison and come away with the Axe.
Do like they did that first drive Saturday against Penn State and play that for – like the way they came out, I'm like, man, these guys they got the memo, right? Like,
yeah, I want the same exact game plan is stupid, obviously, but the intent of like, we're here to beat you guys. Like, we're not here to make this a close game. We're not here. You know, we've seen that before too, right? Like, we had to shorten the game. We had to maximize possessions. Like, no, like, go beat them. Like, just go act like they acted like they wanted to beat Penn State on Saturday. Yeah, like you bring that same intent, you should be able to beat Wisconsin.
Sorry, but that last thing that was like the way they started that game. And I tweeted this out. I was like, they showed competitive fight.
Yes,
like that was a team that came there and felt like we're not underdogs. We're going to win this game. I love the way they started out. That's what they have to bring to Madison.
And you mentioned the line, and we've certainly talked about them a lot. I don't think, as much as Darius has had a good year, I think he's left some yards on the table. You know, at Rutgers, I thought he did. PJ mentioned how he's not seeing things very clearly. There was a run. It was on one of the second half drives, but it must have been in the fourth quarter, where he tried to bounce it outside, and there was
the foot and got north-south.
There was an audible groan from where I was standing to the bench. Like, and usually I've got my headset on like this, like one ear out, so I can kind of hear what's going on. There was an audible from like multiple people, like, oh. Because like the line did what they were supposed to do there, and Darius didn't see it right, wasn't ready for it, didn't plant, wasn't 100%, don't know, ended up getting tackled out by the boundary. And if he just, I think that's why the run game, I think, has struggled. It's been, sometimes he had no chance to do anything, right? They just blew him up in the backfield. But then like the few times where the line did everything they were supposed to do, 5 working as one, as a fist together. And then Darius doesn't see it right. Like, I've never heard an audible groan like that. Like, oh my God. It was like the crowd behind me could see it. It was so loud. Like, you'll hear the build when Coy Parrish is about to return, you hear everybody, or you see someone streaking down the field on a deep route, and the ball's just got to get there. Like, you can hear that. I could hear it from the bench. Like, oh my God, that was there. That would have been an explosive run, and we needed it, and we didn't get it. I don't remember what happened after, but I think that's just been, if it's been one thing or the other, that's why the offensive line, or that's why the running game just hasn't been there as much this year.
And they got to find it against Wisconsin.
They got to win this game. They do.
Yeah.
Like, just go. There's years where, we've all been alive for the 15-year streak or however many years it was, and there were years where you just were not even in their class during that streak. Then there were years where you felt like you were, and weird things kept happening. Tommy Olson's still mad about being called for an illegal hands to the face penalty in the red zone, which was not a good call. That still haunts him, right? You had Big Ten West aspirations multiple times over there. The 2019 game, where you thought they were better than you were better than them, and they boat raced you. Like, take advantage of Wisconsin while Wisconsin's down. And this is down for them, right? The last handful of years. And you mentioned Braylon Allen, Bernsey. The only thing Braylon Allen's doing for the Badgers right now is tweeting negatively after the game, that they lost to Nebraska. Like,
and then he's going to tell stories one day about what actually happened. With
like, that's what's going on right now. They fired the offensive coordinator, the whole bit. So you guys should, I think this Gopher team feels good about itself. Whatever people on the outside think, should they or not, they do, because of how they played and the game last Saturday. Like, they should be going into this game confident. It's not like, ooh, how's Wisconsin going to be? They should be, in my opinion, going into this game confident. And so a lot of it's what you just said, Chipper. They've got dudes on this team. Like, just go be dudes and bring the Axe back.
Yeah.
Should I fire him up before the game? You think that would work?
I think you should give the pregame speech.
You're giving the pregame speech, yeah.
Well, I will say the 2018 halftime speech where I was standing outside the locker room, people have seen it. That was one where I was like, holy bleep, that was and that was, I think, one of the first speeches that made it out onto a video.
Yeah.
Because
was that the do not afraid to be a legend one?
Do not be afraid to be a legend. And I was standing up against the wall like this by the door, and then the door just comes flying out, and the players are there, and I'm like, oh my God, should I get in this? Like, I feel like I could go make a couple tackles because that was insane. That was ridiculous. And we know how that one ended. Anything else we want to discuss before we say goodbye?
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
I'm thankful for both of you. I'm thankful for all of you. I'm thankful
for our listeners because you know what, when you walk to the game or whatever, I went out and saw my buddy Kyle at the Sky U-Ma lot. I got there early and went out to the tailgate and had a couple people, of course, say, are you 100%? But say how much they love the podcast. And, that's cool that I am thankful that when we started this 4 years ago, that it's become what it has and people have made it part of their weekly listening habits. So I'm thankful for them.
Uncle Chip's dream that was culminated there at the Yard House, wasn't it, Cardley?
That was the Yard House. Yes, the Yard House at the West End. It all came together. I could do without being asked what my phone percentage is every 5 feet. That's just me. It's not my phone. I'm not the crazy one. Actually, I do. There, I was like, "What?" I do like when people show me their phone, though. That is the best, and that happens nonstop on Oak Street. It is so good.
That's great.
Happens nonstop, and it's very, very funny. Mine is always at like 37, which would just send Chip into the Mississippi River if he ever knew. That would be bad. We still got to do that. That's another off-season project. Just have you sit in a room with no electricity or no ability to charge and just see when you start to shake and when you start. This is a man who's going crazy. Yeah. What percentage?
Look at him already starting to rock.
Yeah, he's already
one of those dark retreats. Is that what they're called?
Yes.
Like Gobert?
Yeah, Chip's darkness retreat when he has to let it go below 72% for an extended period of time. All right. Well, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. If you're going over to Madison, safe travels. I know a lot of people are annoyed that it's a Black Friday game. I think it's cool. You're the only game on that 11. I think that's a cool opportunity. Then you get the whole Thanksgiving weekend open. So, Burnsy, we'll see you over there. Chipper, we'll see you over there. JacksCafe.com to make your holiday reservations, including breakfast with Santa, December 7th, 14th, and 21st. Those are Saturdays. JaxCafe.com. Have a great Thanksgiving. Travel safely if you're heading over to Madison, and we will talk to you next week on the Parent and Spare podcast.